Hi, Father. Father
Hi.
Peter.
Good.
I
How are you?
Good. It's great
Good.
meeting you, Father. And Jennifer is the one who kind of connected us together.
Yes, yes. We play Thug Life together.
Yes. I just wanted to read your bio so people will
Sure.
know. Father Peter
Okay.
West grew up in Fairfield, New Jersey, and graduated from Manhattan College in 1981. He has been involved with the pro-life movement since 1986. In 1987, he began studies for the priesthood and graduated from the Holy Apostles Seminary in Cromwell, Connecticut. He was ordained May 25th, 1991 for the Archdiocese of Newark. After spending 7 years serving in parishes in the Archdiocese, he was released to work with the Priests for Life. After serving for 13 years as a priest associate for Priests for Life, he also served as vice president for missions at Human Life International from 2011 to 2015. Father West returned to pastoral ministry in June of 2015 and has served as the associate pastor of St. John's Church in Orange, New Jersey until the present. Father West is very active speaking about pro-life and other political interests on social media. He currently has 5,000 friends and 12,424 followers on Facebook. He is also active on Twitter. So, welcome, Father, and we're happy that you're here to speak.
Thank you very much. Okay, so
You
you
may
just like me to tell my story right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, sure. And if you have any questions at the end, and before I start getting into depth about political responsibility, please feel free. But I first, let's begin at the beginning. I was born into a Catholic family. We were Irish for the most part and Democrat, and but I had a very strong Catholic formation in my youth. I believe I went to St. Thomas More School in Fairfield, New Jersey, and I remember on the day I received my first Holy Communion, I told my parents that it was the happiest day of my life. So I believe I had a good Catholic formation, but then as I went to kind of a liberal a Catholic high school, and then later on went off to college, I really fell away from the practice of my faith, and so it wasn't until a few years after college that I really started feeling like something was missing. And I started reading more. I read things like novels by Fyodor Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov. I read St. Augustine's Confessions. And finally, I read a book about Our Lady of Fatima, the story of Our Lady of Fatima. After that, I wanted to really pray the Rosary. And after I started praying the Rosary, I felt a longing to go back to confession, and I did so shortly before my mother died in 1985. And in the advent of that year, I started going to daily mass, and was working also with a group of volunteers who were leaving from the daily mass on Wednesdays to go to serve Mother Teresa's sisters. We work with Mother Teresa's sisters in a soup kitchen in Newark. And through my friend Father Fred Miller, also got involved with working in a homeless shelter for a while in the South Bronx. And during this time, as I got to know Father Miller better, and he introduced me to St. Louis de Montfort, and I made a consecration of myself to Jesus through Mary, following the formula of St. Louis de Montfort. And it was shortly after that I was standing in the back of my parish church, and I was looking at some literature there that had been left by Essex County Right to Life. And one of the things that I saw was the picture of a baby. Babies, thrown in a trash bin. It was you can probably find this picture online someplace, but it was a day's work at a teaching hospital in Canada. So these were babies that were fully formed, and they were thrown in the trash. And I also saw a statistic among that literature there that we lose more babies to abortion in 1 year than we've lost in all of our wars put together, from the Revolutionary War through the current times at that time. So this was 1986. So I know the number of abortions has gone down since then, thank God. But still, it was a tremendous number. I thought abortion at this time was just something, it was wrong, but it was kind of people only in the most desperate of circumstances were using it. But I realized now that it was being used as a form of birth control. And even now, today, I think that it's at least 1 in 5 of every pregnancy ends in the violence of abortion. And I thought about, we just marked D-Day. Think of the young men who risked their lives, who gave their lives, many of them, so that we could be free. And I thought to myself that it wouldn't be too much of a sacrifice for the Lord to ask me to dedicate my life to serving Him in the priesthood. So this is why it was through the pro-life movement that I found my vocation to the priesthood. So I got involved in the Right to Life. I started, praying in front of abortion mills and so forth, and it was through. But more and more, I felt a sense that God was calling me to something deeper, to serve Him as a priest, and I thought that this was the best way that I could spread the pro-life message, because at that time, and still I think today, there are many priests who are reluctant to speak about these issues, and I think that it's because that we are reluctant to speak that we are losing the battle. We're certainly losing the battle at that time, and we've made, unfortunately, little progress since. Although I do see signs of hope on the horizon with the number of abortions going down. I do see that more and more pro-life political leaders are being elected to office. I'm greatly heartened by President Trump's his presence at the March for Life this past January, and other things that he has done. So we can win, but we need to speak out boldly in defense of human life. So I was ordained in 1991 and served in parishes, and for a while I was very happy, and it was called speaking about pro-life issues. I was actually involved in a certain number of cases in which I was actually able to convince women not to go through with planned. So yeah, that was wonderful work that I felt I was doing. But more and more, I felt called to full-time pro-life activism. And so I approached, I saw the Priest for Life was looking for people, and I approached the Archbishop at the time, which was at the time Archbishop McCarrick, and he told me no, that the people like you, the pastor likes you. Wasn't quite true at the time, really. But then also that we need priests, so I couldn't. I had to obey him, and but I knew I would have an opportunity at another time to ask him again. So I just accepted it as God's will, And that year, later that year, there was a Governor Christine Todd Whitman had been elected as the governor of New Jersey. She had been reelected, and she was going to use our basilica for an interfaith inaugural prayer service. Now, I have nothing against an interfaith service in our basilica, but Governor Whitman had just signed a bill that would have vetoed a bill that would have outlawed partial birth abortion. So a very gruesome abortion procedure. And here we were having her at our basilica. So I said we wouldn't have a racist, we wouldn't have an anti-Semite at our cathedral. Why would we have the chief supporter of partial birth abortion be honored this way? So I spoke out publicly against it, and when the Archbishop said that he would not be opposed to a public demonstration outside the cathedral, I organized one. And later, after that event, I met with the Archbishop again, asked him to be released to work with Priests for Life, and he released me. So I was released for 3 years at a time. Each time I had to renew it constantly, and it came to a point where I could no longer, they would ask me to come back. And so I just accepted coming back to the diocese after serving 13 years with Priests for Life, and then 4 years with Human Life International. And part of my work with Human Life International was traveling with the pilgrim icon of Our Lady of Czestochowa. This was a project that was envisioned by some Russians and also some Polish people, especially Eva Kowalska, who wrote a new icon of Our Lady of Czestochowa and gave it as a gift to the Russians. And if you've known that there's historical enmity between these two groups, but she wanted to bring about peace, and that's one of the things that they have in common. They love icons, and so she had this dream of bringing the pilgrim icon of Our Lady of Czestochowa all the way across Russia, all the way to Portugal, to Fatima, and then on to the United States and then other parts of the world. So that's what happened. And they called it the International Pilgrimage in Defense of Human Life and the family. So it started in Vladivostok in Russia and went all the way through 24 different countries in Europe, including to Fatima. And I received the pilgrim icon in Maryland and brought it all around the United States. But I've been working now as a priest associate at St. John's Church since June of 2015. So again, it's still, you can do a lot of things in the pro-life movement as a priest. Sometimes I will go and pray in front of the local abortion mill in Montclair. But most of my activity in regards to pro-life these days has been, to be a voice in social media, and I think it's just necessary. And we see how the president uses Twitter, and a lot of people tell him he shouldn't be doing that. But if he didn't do that, he couldn't compete with some of the voices in the mainstream media who just really just want to distort what he has to say. Now, right now, I'd like to talk a little bit about political responsibility. And, some people say that we shouldn't be concerned about politics. But in an interview with a French journalist, André Frossard, early in his papacy, Pope St. John Paul II said, "When the Church speaks on political matters, she does so in relation to her duty to teach faith and morality." And the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, "The Church makes a moral judgment about economic and social matters when the fundamental rights of the person or the salvation of the souls requires it." In the moral order, she bears a mission distinct from that of political authorities. The church is concerned with the temporal aspects of the common good because they are ordered to that sovereign good, our ultimate end. She strives to inspire right attitudes with respect to earthly goods and socioeconomic relationships. You know, I think it was a shame that recently President Trump, when he went to the shrine of St. John Paul II in Washington, D.C., and he was criticized for that, and I thought it was unjustly. And this had been a visit that had been long planned, and he wanted to mark the anniversary, the historic anniversary on June 2nd of Pope John Paul II returning to his native Poland in 1979. And this was a time that, remember that Poland was under an authoritarian communist government, and the communist government would not allow him to come to visit Poland because they knew he was going to speak out for human rights. They knew he would criticize this authoritarian communist government. And so the people of Poland, they prayed at the shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa at Jasna Góra, and they called it the Siege of Jericho. They prayed for 7 days straight, and on that last day, the communist government relaxed their restrictions. They allowed Pope John Paul II to come, and that led to the fall of the communist government in Poland and other communist governments throughout Eastern Europe. So we can see the power of prayer, and also that the church is called to play a political role. And in his letter to families in 1981, Pope St. John Paul II said, "The social role of families is called to find expression in political intervention. Families should be the first to take steps that the laws and institutions of the state not only do not offend, but support and positively defend the rights and the duties of the family. Along these lines, families should be aware of being protagonists of what is known as family politics and assume responsibility for transforming society." And so, as
do you know the mute button? It's just going to take 2 seconds. If you could mute yourself and unmute, so that, because there's a little bit of an echo I hear. So just mute yourself and unmute immediately afterwards. It'll catch everything up.
Okay, sure.
It's near the phone. There's a mic. Do you see that mic?
I just did it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, good.
Is it still giving the echo?
No.
Okay, good. So as Catholics, we are called to participate in the political process. This is not only a right, it is an obligation. And in the Second Vatican Council document, Gaudium et Spes, it says, "Every citizen ought to be mindful of his right and duty to use his vote to promote the common good." And, when we think about the common good today, it's not just simply about protecting the lives of the unborn, which has to always be the primary issue, because without the right to life, all other rights are meaningless. But we now see people calling for abolishing the police department and abolishing the United States altogether. Some of them, they chant no borders, no walls, no USA at all. Now, we know that our country is not perfect. We know that there are flaws that we have to work to overcome, but we don't believe in abolishing the state. in order to create something new. We don't know what we don't know. It's especially when we know that the far left ideology, pro-abortion ideology, anti-police ideology, anti-military ideology that these people have, we have a duty to get involved. And we always tell people, in the pro-life movement, that the life you save may be your own. And we see now some of the worst pro-abortion politicians are in the Northeast. And these same pro-abortion politicians, they sent people who were infected with COVID-19 into the nursing homes, the most vulnerable populations, and almost half of the casualties that have been suffered during this recent pandemic have been in our nursing homes. So if you have a lack of respect for life in its beginning stages, you're going to have a lack of respect for life in its end stages. And how did Governor Cuomo of New York react to this? He said, "Well, they're old people, and old people die." This is that's a horrible thing to say. A lack of respect for the life of the elderly. So when you get involved in the Right to Life movement, the life you may save may be your own. In their document, Living the Gospel of Life, the American bishops once wrote, "Every voice matters in the public forum. Every vote counts. Every act of responsible citizenship is an exercise of significant individual power. We must exercise that power in ways that defend human life, especially those of God's children who are unborn, disabled, or otherwise vulnerable." So we have our voting is our right, and it's our duty. We are in an election year, and we face a choice. It's a pretty stark choice, I think, that we are facing between life and death. Unfortunately, the Democrat Party of my youth, as Ronald Reagan said, "I didn't leave them; they left me." And a lot of the things that I believed then, I still believe today. I still believe in protecting civil rights. I believe that we have a responsibility toward the most vulnerable in our society, and I believe that in many ways the racism exists and it has to be overcome. But we look at the welfare state, which people had a lot of hope in the Great Society programs of the 1960s, but that has led to the destruction of the black family, to greater crime in our streets. And so, for example, in Chicago, we've had some terrible crime where on the weekend that George Floyd was murdered, and I believe he was murdered by that police officer. 82 people were shot in the city of Chicago, 19 of them fatally. And since George Floyd's death in Chicago, there have been 47 dead, 193 that have been wounded. What is going on in our inner cities? It's fatherlessness. It's the destruction of the family. It's the destruction of the church. People have fallen away from God. They need to return to God. This is not the fault of simply bad policing. And although that may have a role to play, but we see. I think it's a lot more than that. Now, I want to share with you a letter that was written just recently by Cardinal by Archbishop Maria Vigano, titular bishop of Upiana. He is the former apostolic nuncio to the United States. And I'd like to read this letter and maybe comment on it a little bit. But he is speaking here to the president, and he is encouraging him. And in this letter, I don't think I've had time to read the whole thing to you, but it says, I'm going to just quote this one part here. These two sides, which have a biblical nature, follow the clear separation between the offspring of the woman and the offspring of the serpent. On the one hand, there are those, although they have 1,000 defects and weaknesses, are motivated by the desire to do good, to be honest, to raise a family, to engage in work, to give prosperity to their homeland, to help the needy in obedience to the law of God, to merit the kingdom of heaven. On the other hand, there are those who serve themselves, who do not hold any moral principles, who want to demolish the family and the nation, exploit workers, to make themselves unduly wealthy, foment internal divisions and wars, and accumulate power and money. For them, the fallacious illusion of temporal well-being will one day, if they do not repent, yield to the terrible fate that awaits them far from God in eternal damnation. And so he is congratulating President Trump for fighting against the deep state. And he sees our current state as a battle between good and evil. And we know our president is flawed, but I believe he is a good man. And I think he's fighting on the side of right. And we need to pray for him. And I myself will be supporting him in this current election year. Now, Karen, I don't know how much time we have left, but...
Did you want to say something else, Phil?
No? Do you have a question for me?
I was just amazed by your story that you said that you've gone away for some time, but it seems as if once you came back, you were so easily led. God was with you every step of the way to where you are now. It's amazing, and I'm so glad that you had answered the call of God, because this is a great example, and hopefully many people hear your story and they follow, because life is going to win.
Yes, when I think of my own vocation story, I think of like a boat out on the water, and you keep on rowing in a particular direction. And eventually the horizon appears and it becomes clear to you where you should be going. So you kind of step out in faith and you keep walking, and and later it becomes clear to you what you need. But you just start by doing what you think is right at the time, and and things become clearer as you go on.
Only pro-life president that we've ever seen like this. It's just amazing in a time that we need it so badly.
If you go to go to Google, or use something like DuckDuckGo, actually it might be better than Google. But if you find there's a list here from the Family Resource Council, listing pages upon pages of the wonderful things that President Trump has done with regard to pro-life. And Priests for Life, my former employer there, they also have a list of accomplishments. They boiled it down to 16 of the best, the biggest accomplishments in terms of appointing judges. People think of just 2 Supreme Court justices, but there have been 192 other judges that he's appointed as well in the Court of Appeals and other courts as well. So he, like in February 2019, the Protect Life rule was finalized, cutting Planned Parenthood's federal funding by $60 million. Now, he's not a dictator, so he can't totally wipe it out altogether, because the Congress has, authority as well. So we have to work on a Congress, electing a pro-life Congress to totally defund Planned Parenthood. But he reversed the Mexico City policy, stopping overseas abortion funding.
Wasn't that the first one he did? That was the first executive order that he did.
That was the first. I mean, yeah. And
it kind of marks a map for him if that's the first step that he made in his presidency.
Yeah. I mean, that was an easy one. I have to say it was an easy one, but still, we thank him for doing it.
We saved $500 million a year.
Exactly. Yeah. And let's see, the Trump-Pence administration has issued new guidance ensuring hospitals provide medical care to infants who survive abortions. So protecting abortion survivors. He said, I will veto any legislation that weakens current pro-life federal policies and laws or that encourages the destruction of innocent human life at any stage. My administration has repeatedly demonstrated its respect for human life and conscience at all stages. Today, we recommit ourselves to protecting innocent life every day and at every stage.
Wow.
And I think of also, of what he's done for the black community, funding historically black colleges, in initiating the First Step program for criminal justice reform, providing opportunity zones, so that people can have a step up. And before this whole pandemic hit, he had the lowest African American unemployment ever in the history of our country before the recent pandemic. So there's so many fronts on which he's fighting in terms of keeping us out of foreign entanglements, bringing back manufacturing jobs. We have to be concerned about the working man and protecting life, protecting the family. So I think he's done a fantastic job, and he's not perfect. No human being is, but I thank God for him every day.